This week, as a people, we get to experience the mystery of God, of love, of suffering. It is easy this week to be a spectator and not a participant. Because this week, our ideas of God is completely blown away. God is not a superhero who will rescue like the movies. But God is the one who suffers and dies. God is not a CEO on top of our building and commanding everything happening. God is intimately so close involved that sometimes we cannot even see God, invisible. And God is not a judge who will point out everything wrong with us. God is someone who will take on the full effects of our foolishness and sinfulness and say, go and sin no more. I learned a lot about God when my grandmother died. She suffered, my mother's mother. She suffered a great deal, and she had 7 years of dialysis, which means her intestine was just blockage. And a lot of her children and grandchildren were foolish and having a lot of drama and issues. And my grandfather had died 9 months before. And I was already a Jesuit, and I came home. She was waiting for me, and she says, grandson, I'm waiting for you. And then she had an epileptic seizure. And I got into panic, and I was mean to the nurses because they didn't do anything because I'm powerless. And it was hard. And when she woke up, she said something that took me months to understand. I asked her, Grandma, how do you do this? How do you endure this? She says, Jesus is suffering with me, and I share his suffering. And I took it. I'm like, yes, she's a pious Vietnamese Catholic woman. Of course, she would say that. After she died, after I allowed myself to grieve and to get angry of God for letting her suffer for so long, I began to understand. And so this mystery is not something we can think through or we can explain away. We have to enter it. And that's the invitation this week. To enter our own suffering and those of others. To enter what is annoying, what surprises, what we don't understand. And to suspend understanding for a little while. To go through it before the mystery of God, of love, of suffering will reveal itself. I encourage you to read this passage again and definitely go to the Holy Triduum, to the services. But pay attention to what Jesus does, which is not a lot. He receives. He's so vulnerable. He's so vulnerable. And he's quiet. And he trusts. And he forgives. And he laments with people who suffer with him. And he allows people who betray him to kiss him. And he looks at people who deny him and still say, I forgive you. So this is what Henry Nouwen encourages us. He talks about wounds, but you can change the word wounds to suffering. Anything that comes that we do not like, we do not choose, and we do not prefer. The great challenge is living your wounds instead of thinking them through. It is better to cry than to worry. Better to feel your wounds deeply than to understand them. Better to let them enter into your silence than to talk about them. The choice you face constantly is whether you are taking your wounds to your head or to your heart. In your head, you can analyze them, find the causes and consequences, and coin words to speak and write about them. But no final healing can come from that source. You need to let your wounds go down to your heart. Then you can live through them and discover that not only they will not destroy you, they might give greater life. Brené Brown, who studies vulnerability, has shown after 16 years of evidence-based research, says that we enter vulnerability. It is actually not weakness. It is the birthplace of connection, compassion, strength, and courage. So this week we have a lot of opportunities to enter suffering and to let the suffering and wounds go down. Our own, people around us, people not very far, people who are abandoned, people who are misunderstood, people whose society marginalized, and also our own. So any time this week, something that comes you do not like, you do not prefer, you feel misunderstood, you feel rejected. Opportunities. Like my grandmother. I share Jesus' suffering. He shares mine. And in time, slowly, something else will be born. An understanding about God, about love, about suffering, that will change us. One more thing. I know a lot of us are going to watch Games of Thrones. Wonderful. Also, if you get a chance, watch an older movie called Of Gods and Men, about Algerian monks who tried to engage the Muslim in the community and they were killed. And watch the scene when they had the Last Supper. So please, let us this week not just be spectators, but be participants in our own suffering, in the wounds of others, in the suffering of Christ.